Welcome back to None of the Above. I certainly hope you enjoyed our last segment. I thought Professor Jackson was a terrific guest. In fact, I wish I was in college taking a class from Professor Jackson. He's very knowledgeable on his subject, and he speaks so clearly, and you really come away from a conversation with him thinking that you've really learned something and gained something. So at this point, we've now done 2 sessions on redistricting. Professor Jackson, in our first segment in our last show, talked about the background, the history, the constitutional implications, etc. And then today we talked about some solution sets, not necessarily at the 10,000-foot level, but certainly a little more conceptual. What we're going to do in this next segment is drill down even further into the world of redistricting, and we're going to talk to Michael Kolenc from Yes for Independent Maps. It's an Illinois organization that's working on the ground as we speak to try and make a difference in redistricting. And I would suggest to you that Yes for Independent Maps is not a lot different than what's going on in many other states at this point in time. A lot of people have awakened to redistricting. They're fed up with what's going on with redistricting. They want transparency. They want independence. They do not want their legislators picking who they're going to represent. So again, we're going to spend some time today with Mike and talk about his organization, what they're about and what they're doing. And for those of you that have been with us before, you know that one of the important parts of this show is to talk about how to get involved in politics, how to build coalitions. We're going to overlap a little bit and combine the 2 thoughts together. So, Mike, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And you are the campaign manager for Yes for Independent Maps?
That's right.
And before we got on the show, you said your mother doesn't know what you do. So now's the time to tell your mother what it is you do when you go to work.
Yeah, so I mean, the job of a campaign manager, it really is to come and form the foundation for an operation, be it a small race or a large race. Campaigns are nothing more than businesses that must raise sometimes incredible amounts of capital in a very short time, create very vast infrastructures, get people up to speed on an issue in order to achieve a very, very specific goal, which, for the most part is victory on election day.
And that's an interesting point we want to make here. You are in the middle of a campaign. You consider yourself in the middle of an election. Come November of 14, you plan to be on the ballot and you plan to win an election, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about what your campaign is and what the election victory you hope to gain in November.
Yeah, so Yes for Independent Maps is a grassroots statewide coalition, a political campaign that's working to place an independent redistricting amendment on the Illinois Constitution in 2014. So in order to do that, we must go through the ballot measure process. We must collect signatures by May 4th deadline. We need about 300,000 signatures of Illinois registered voters to get on the ballot in November 2014.
And the number 300,000, is that a constitutional mandate, a statutory mandate?
It is. It's a mandate. It's a percentage of a previous gubernatorial race. I'm not sure if it's 8 or 10, but it's 298,000 and change signatures we need. Of course, because we'll have bad signatures and we'll face court challenges on signatures. We obviously aim for much higher than that.
Okay, and then you plan to get your issue on the ballot, and then you will be having a full-blown political campaign in November, the goal of which is to get people to vote for you. Do you need a majority vote, a supermajority vote? What's your goal on this one?
Yeah, so we either need a simple majority, 50% plus 1 of everyone that votes on Election Day in November, or, which is more likely, we need 60% plus 1 of people that only vote on our issue. So there's something in campaign jargon called drop-off. People go vote for governor and senator, and slowly as they go down the ballot, they stop voting. So we need to capture 60% plus 1 of everyone that votes on this initiative in order to win.
So there's obviously a group of people in Illinois who've come together and decided that redistricting isn't working in Illinois. How did that start to happen? What's the math behind that?
Yeah, so really this all came about with the Blagojevich scandal a few years ago, and I'm sure your viewers are well aware of the trials and tribulations that involved where that happened there. Really some good government reform-minded groups came out of that and really set about creating better government in Illinois. And, they passed campaign finance, and this was really the next issue that they wanted to tackle. So this coalition made up of the League of Women Voters, Common Cause, PERG, and a whole bunch of other reform-minded groups came together, studied best practices across the country, and really looked at the California model for independent redistricting commissions and tried to make that model work within the unique constitutional confines of Illinois. So really, this was a 2-year process of a lot of nonprofit, reform-minded groups and individuals across the state figuring out how to make this process more transparent, more fair, more independent, and drawn, quite frankly, with nonpartisan criteria.
So how long ago did this get formed, this effort?
Yeah, so the campaign formed late summer once the actual language of the constitutional amendment was finalized. At that point, they handed it off to me, and we formed the campaign, Yes for Independent Maps, and went about building a statewide coalition of both Democrats and Republicans, progressives and conservatives, business community, reform community, everyone to get on board with this. And we've been circulating petitions over the past many months. As you might imagine, circulating petitions in the Midwest or Illinois, for that matter, during the winter is not easy. It's been a very snowy day in Chicago as well as the rest of the state. So collecting these petition signatures is a challenge. Illinois is not like California, where they legislate by ballot measure, where they have the infrastructure really to gather hundreds of thousands of signatures. We're having to create something from start here in Illinois, and that's one of the major problems that we face as a statewide campaign right now, is really getting these signatures to place this on the ballot in November.
And I take it the impetus for this, again, is a dissatisfaction with the map that got drawn based upon the 2010 census and then the election results from that initial map.
Well, I think it's more complex than that. It's really a snowball effect that's been happening decade after decade. We've seen public polling. The Paul Simon Institute does some good polling on this, and they've been able to track over time really the anxiety that Illinois has with the redistricting process. And the most current Paul Simon Institute poll really reflects our internal polling that about 70% of people across the political spectrum are not happy with how maps are drawn right now. Democrats, Republicans, and independents in this state are not happy. So this really isn't a partisan issue. Mistakes that a lot of campaigns will make when they're trying to implement this is that the party that's out of power in the state house will really be the one will be the force behind the campaign. That's really not the case here in Illinois. We have a coalition that spans the political spectrum. We have David Axelrod and Bill Daley, former Secretary of Commerce and Obama Chief of Staff, along with all the Republican gubernatorial candidates and some very right-leaning individuals in the state. It is a left and right coalition that's really come together because now is the time really to fix this process.
So you get all these people together, they say, we've got a problem, and you know that you have to get something on the ballot, you have to amend the Constitution in Illinois,
Yep.
but you have to come up with a solution set. You have to decide what your solution is. So how does this group, in working together, formulate the solution, and what is that solution that you've come up with?
Yeah, well, I mean, the good part is that a lot of this heavy lifting was done by these reform groups over the past 2 years. So they really handed us an amendment to the Constitution that is sound constitutionally, that we believe will pass Supreme Court muster, and that is very popular with the public. It really works to set an independent commission in place that is free from partisan politics. For example, if you are an elected official at any level in the state, if 3 years before this commission is set, you ran for office, if you're a state employee or a government employee, if you're a state lobbyist, a federal lobbyist, if you have a contract with the state, any of those people described cannot be on this commission. And then for a period of 10 years after, you cannot run for state office, nor can you be appointed to any position in the state that requires Senate confirmation. So, this framework really works to place an independence within the system that has not existed in Illinois previously. In Illinois, there is a habit, and this is not unique to Illinois. There is a habit everywhere of people trying to game the system for their own benefit or the benefit of their political party. The criteria we've set out for this independent commission, we feel, really negates that.
And how about transparency? How do you deal with that issue?
Yeah, so we like to say that this is going to be the most transparent part of state government. Any two commission members meeting is an open meeting. We have to see their minutes. We have to see, them talk. Any meetings they have, we have to see. They have to be 48 hours notice of any meetings they do. They have to tour the state at least once in every judicial district before and after the maps are drawn. And even the intake of resumes to be on this commission is considered open meeting, and everyone gets to see exactly who's applying and exactly who's being, pulled out because they have a conflict of interest.
So you mentioned that some of the modeling here was done after California.
Yeah.
California's how many years ahead on this? Like 6 or 8 years ahead, based on what they
Yeah, a
did?
little bit. They passed it in 2008, so they had maps drawn in 2010 and then implemented, 2012 after the census there. But they've seen a tone change in Sacramento. No longer are they facing, the budget impasses and the gridlock from before. People are actually working together, working across the aisle to get things done in California. And this coalition will be very clear that we're not pushing any one agenda item. We have the Chamber of Commerce and the Legal Women Voters and PERG on board.
Michael, I'm sorry to interrupt, but staff tells me we're having some video problems here. So if it's okay with you, what I think we'll do is we'll take the last good-looking still frame of you that we had on the screen, and we'll post that, and then you and I will do a bit of a radio interview for the last 5 minutes. Is that okay with you?
That sounds perfect.
Perfect. So I think where we left off is I was asking you about one of the goals of this effort is to create a competitive environment in the political sphere, and how that related to what your mission is and what you found in California.
Yeah, so really competitiveness is not a part of the criteria we have for drawing maps. A lot of times we're more focused on keeping communities of interest whole, be they economic, social, language, or minority. Too many times our political leaders, regardless of political party, are drawing maps so that they can reward their friends and punish their foes. And they do that by looking at house by house and looking at voting records and seeing how they can create districts and weaken districts. So competitiveness really is not a criteria set forth in this amendment.
So when you structure the amendment, do you have to define your goals, or do you just define the amendment and know what your goals are?
So we actually defined the criteria for drawing maps inside of the amendment. The commission will get to, the regulatory process after this passes will add some more detail into what some of these terms mean. For example, what, when we say not to draw to discriminate against or in favor of any political party or group, that a little bit of that has to be defined in the regulatory process. But these reform groups have been at this for many years, and they intend to be, at the table talking with the state once this passes in November, so they can actually see their vision for a fair, independent redistricting process enshrined in the state.
And again, this is going on in many other states around the country as we speak, correct?
That's what our understanding is. We've had a lot of groups reach out to us actually for advice on this. Most recently we've had folks in Michigan reach out to our campaign about what we did and how we're working. Unfortunately or fortunately, my job is to make sure that this gets on the ballot in Illinois and achieves victory in November. So we don't have a lot of time to be helping other states. But this is something that is going on across the country as we speak.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cross over to another issue we've talked about on None of the Above a few times and see how it's impacting you, which is campaign finance. What campaign finance laws are restricting you in terms of how you raise money, if any?
Really, in Illinois, there are no campaign finance limits on what a ballot initiative committee can raise. I can raise unlimited amounts of money from individuals, unions, corporations. Really, the only issue is a political issue. Do I take, $1 million from the Koch brothers or from George Soros? Really is a political question more than a legal question. There are no limits, but like any other political campaign, we have to report on a regular basis what all of our contributions are. There's if we take in something that's more than $1,000, it has to be reported within 5 days. So there is 100% transparency on the intake and expenditure side, but there are no limits on what we can take.
And even though this is something that's being voted on, essentially your finances are considered about 100% soft money, I take it?
Correct.
Okay. So in the remaining time, I just to recap again for our viewers, I think you've done what we've talked about on our show in terms of how you build a campaign, how you build a coalition, how you define an issue. And the last piece we want to talk about is how people get active. So how do people find you? How do they contribute? People in Illinois or wherever, how do they help you push this over the goal line? Give us the spiel.
Yeah, so, Yes for Independent Maps, you can find us on the web at independentmaps.org. You know, anyone in Illinois, we encourage you to help us circulate petitions. Really, we're looking at about, I think it's 89 days before our 300,000 signatures are due in Springfield. So anyone that comes to our website and requests one petition to 100 petitions, we put those in the mail the same day to you, give you instructions for do's and don'ts and how to collect signatures and a return address to send them back. For folks that would like to contribute, I would encourage you to go to the same website, independentmaps.org, and you do not have to be from Illinois to contribute to this campaign. We'll gladly take a contribution from $5 all the way up, and we encourage that, you know, because this is really about, you know, putting an independent process in place to draw maps so that there's faith in this system. And, you know, what I tell people is if this can happen in Illinois, this can happen anywhere.
I think that's a good way to conclude. If this can happen in Illinois, this can happen anywhere. So, Michael, thank you very much for your time. We wish you all the best with your campaign, and perhaps we'll have you back for a rematch later in the year to see how things are going.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too.